In the summer of 1858, the Deep South whispered a name it wasn't supposed to know. The Black Panther, the Black Cowboy who freed 7 plantations. By June, overseers from Natchez to Vicksburg were reporting the same impossible scene. Entire slave quarters emptied overnight, guard dogs found tied in their own chains, and the master's horses ridden off without a single hoofprint showing who took them. Plantation owners mocked the idea of a lone black cowboy humiliating their patrols, yet every one of them locked their doors before sunset. They never understood how he slipped past their armed men, or why every escape ended with plantation records missing and a single black duster pinned to a fence post. But by the time the 7th plantation fell, the men who hunted him had vanished without a trace. What exactly did the Black Panther do to them? And why did every witness refuse to speak his name again? Before we go any further, comment where in the world you are watching from and make sure to subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you don't want to miss. The sun broke over the Crow plantation like a wound opening across the Mississippi sky. Elias stood in the stables, his hands gentle on the mare's neck, whispering low sounds that only horses understood. The animal had come in wild 3 weeks ago, eyes rolling white with terror, hooves striking at anything that moved. Now she stood calm beneath his touch, breathing steady, her muscles loose. "Easy now," Elias murmured. Easy? He was 26 years old and built like the work he did, lean from long days, strong from breaking horses that other men couldn't touch. His fingers moved along the mare's shoulder, checking for tension, for the places where fear still lived beneath the skin. She nickered softly. Trust was forming. Behind him, Isaiah appeared in the stable doorway, younger by 3 years, and restless in ways Elias had never been. Isaiah carried a saddlebag over one shoulder, the leather worn but carefully maintained. He moved with the energy of a man who had somewhere to be, even when he had nowhere to go. "She's coming along," Isaiah said, watching Elias work. "She'll be ready by week's end." "You always say that, and I'm always right." Isaiah grinned, but something flickered behind his eyes, something bright and secret. He shifted the saddlebag higher on his shoulder, and Elias caught a glimpse of folded papers inside, edges dark with ink. Maps, maybe. Drawings. Isaiah had been spending more time alone lately, slipping away after dark, returning with dirt on his boots from places the plantation fields didn't reach. Elias didn't ask questions. Asking questions got people hurt. "You working this morning?" Isaiah asked. "Same as always." "Good. Keep Rusk's eyes on you then." Isaiah turned to leave, but Elias caught his arm. "What are you planning?" "Nothing you need to worry about yet." "Isaiah!" "I said yet." Isaiah pulled free gently, his smile returning. "Trust me, brother. When it's time, you'll know." He disappeared into the morning light, saddlebag swinging at his side. Elias returned to the mare, but the ease he'd felt moments before was gone. Isaiah had always been the one who dreamed bigger, who spoke of freedom like it was a place you could walk to if you just knew the right path. Elias loved his brother for it, feared for him too. The other enslaved workers moved through the yard, voices low, carrying water and tools and the weight of another day. They nodded to Elias as they passed. He had a reputation here, quiet, skilled, someone who kept his head down and his hands busy. They respected that, respected him. But respect didn't protect anyone. By mid-morning, the heat had settled thick across the plantation. Elias was leading the mare through her paces in the corral when he heard shouting from the main house. He looked up to see Tobias Rusk striding across the yard, his face red and tight with anger. Rusk was overseer here, a man who wore his cruelty like a badge, who believed control came through fear and nothing else. Behind Rusk, 2 local enforcers followed, men Elias recognized from town. They wore guns on their hips and expressions that said they were looking for an excuse. Isaiah stood near the water trough, frozen. "You!" Rusk pointed at Isaiah, his voice carrying across the yard. "You're the one who took her." Elias's stomach dropped. He knew which horse Rusk meant before the words were spoken. The mare beside him, the one he'd spent 3 weeks breaking, had gone missing 2 nights ago. Elias had assumed she'd wandered off, maybe spooked by something in the dark. He'd found her the next morning, grazing near the creek. "I didn't take nothing," Isaiah said, his voice steady but his hands trembling. "Liar!" Rusk closed the distance fast, grabbing Isaiah by the shirt. "You been sneaking around at night. You think I don't see? You think I don't know?" Elias dropped the mare's lead and ran toward them. "Isaiah didn't steal her. I found her by the creek. She just wandered off." Rusk turned on him, eyes narrow. "You covering for him?" "I'm telling the truth. I trained that mare myself. She's been in the stables every day since—" One of the enforcers stepped forward and drove his fist into Elias's stomach. The air left his lungs in a rush. He doubled over, gasping, and another blow caught him across the jaw. He hit the ground hard, tasting blood. "Stay down," the enforcer said. Through blurred vision, Elias saw Isaiah struggling against Rusk's grip, saw the crowd of enslaved workers gathering but keeping their distance. Nobody moved to help. Nobody could. "We're taking him to town," Rusk announced. "Let the law handle this." "What law?" Isaiah shouted. "You already decided." Rusk struck him across the face. Isaiah went quiet. They dragged Isaiah toward the wagon while Elias tried to stand, tried to move, but hands held him down. Other workers, their grips apologetic but firm. "Don't make it worse," their silence said. "Don't give them a reason." The sun climbed higher. The trial happened in the town square, beneath the shadow of the courthouse that had never seen justice for anyone who looked like Isaiah. Rusk presented his case to a gathering of white men, who nodded along, their minds already made up. The mare had been found near where Isaiah slept. Isaiah had been seen walking at night. The evidence was circumstantial, invented, meaningless. Isaiah denied everything. His voice rang clear across the square. "I didn't steal nothing. I never stole nothing." Nobody listened. Elias stood at the edge of the crowd, his face swelling from the beating, his ribs aching with each breath. He tried to push forward, tried to speak, but when he opened his mouth, Rusk's men surrounded him. One pressed a hand against his chest. "You want to join him?" the man whispered. Elias went still. Rage burned through him, hot and useless. The verdict came fast. Guilty. The sentence came faster. Death. By late afternoon, they were dragging Isaiah toward the hanging tree on the edge of town, an ancient oak with branches thick enough to hold the weight of injustice. A crowd followed, some curious, some celebratory, all complicit. Elias stumbled after them, held back by enforcers who laughed as they shoved him to the ground whenever he got too close. His vision swam. Blood ran from his nose and mouth. But he kept trying to stand, kept trying to reach his brother. "Isaiah!" His voice cracked. "Isaiah!" Isaiah looked back once, his face bruised but unbroken. He mouthed something Elias couldn't hear. Then they put the noose around his neck. The world became slow and terrible. Elias watched as they tied the rope, watched as Rusk gave the signal, watched as the ground disappeared beneath Isaiah's feet. His brother's body jerked, twisted, went still. Elias screamed, but the sound was swallowed by laughter from the crowd. He tried to run forward, and someone kicked his legs out from under him. He hit the dirt face first, choking on dust and grief. Boots pressed against his back, holding him down, forcing him to watch, as Isaiah swung gently in the breeze. "Let this be a lesson," Rusk called out to the gathered enslaved workers. "This is what happens to thieves." The crowd dispersed slowly, their entertainment finished. Elias lay in the dirt, unable to move, unable to breathe. The enforcers kicked him once more for good measure, then walked away laughing, their voices fading into the evening. Darkness crept across the sky. Elias's vision blurred, consciousness slipping away in waves. He heard distant voices, boots on packed earth, the sound of someone cutting Isaiah's body down, but he couldn't lift his head, couldn't speak. Time passed. Hours, maybe. The world became shapes and shadows. Then, through the haze, a voice. Old, female, close. "Lord have mercy," the voice said. "What they done to you?" Hands touched his shoulder, surprisingly strong despite their age. Someone rolled him onto his back. Elias forced his eyes open and saw a woman's face above him. Dark skin lined with decades, eyes sharp despite the dim light. Nona Grady. He knew her by reputation only. A root worker who lived alone on the outskirts, someone most people avoided out of fear or respect. "Can you hear me, boy?" Elias tried to speak, but only a groan emerged. "We got to move you. Can't leave you here." Nona slipped her arms beneath his shoulders, impossibly strong for her size, and began dragging him across the ground. Each movement sent fire through his ribs. He gasped, darkness pulling at him again. His head lolled to the side as she pulled him away from the hanging tree. Through blurred vision, he saw the wagon where they'd loaded Isaiah's body. Saw the black oilskin duster still tied to Isaiah's saddle, the one his brother wore when he rode out at night. The duster swayed in the night breeze, empty sleeves moving like a ghost, reaching for something just out of reach. Then Elias's vision went dark, and Nona's voice became the only thing tethering him to the world. The cabin smelled of earth and smoke, and something sharp Elias couldn't name. His body felt like broken glass held together by thread. Every breath brought pain that radiated from his ribs outward, spreading through his chest and down into his legs. He opened his eyes to firelight dancing across rough wooden walls. Herbs hung from the rafters above, bundles of sage and sweetgrass and plants he didn't recognize, their dried leaves casting strange shadows. Jars lined a shelf near the door, filled with dark powders and pale roots suspended in amber liquid. The fire burned low in a stone hearth, just enough heat to keep the night air from settling too deep into the room. Nona Grady moved through the space with practiced efficiency, her movements deliberate despite her age. She knelt beside the cot where Elias lay and pressed a wet cloth to his forehead. "Don't try to speak," she said. Her voice was rough but not unkind. "You got bones that need setting and wounds that need cleaning before you do anything else." Elias tried to lift his head anyway. The room spun violently. He fell back against the thin pillow, gasping. Nona made a disapproving sound in the back of her throat. "Stubborn. Just like your brother." She reached for a clay bowl on the floor beside her, dipped her fingers into a dark paste that smelled of mint and something bitter. "This going to hurt," she warned. She pressed the poultice against the worst of his cuts, the split skin above his eye, the gash along his jaw. Elias hissed through his teeth, hands gripping the edges of the cot. The paste burned like fire at first, then numbed to a distant ache. "Sleep now," Nona said. "Healing don't happen while you fighting it." Darkness pulled him under again before he could respond. Time became strange. Elias woke in fragments, brief moments of awareness before unconsciousness dragged him back down. Once, he opened his eyes to find morning light streaming through the cabin's single window. Nona spooning broth into his mouth while she murmured words he couldn't quite hear. Another time, he woke to complete darkness, the fire reduced to glowing embers, and heard her voice saying something that sounded like prayer. On the second day, she rewrapped his ribs. Elias was awake enough to feel every movement, every pull of the cloth as she bound him tight. He bit down on a strip of leather she'd placed between his teeth to keep from crying out. "Vengeance blinds," Nona said quietly as she worked, "but purpose saves." He didn't understand what she meant, didn't have the strength to ask. She helped him drink water from a tin cup, her hand steady beneath his head. The water tasted like it came from a deep well, cold and clean. It was the best thing he'd ever tasted. "Your brother," Elias managed to whisper. His voice came out cracked and raw. "Rest," Nona said. "There's time for talking when you can sit up proper." The third morning arrived clear and cold. Elias woke to find his mind sharp for the first time since the beating. The pain in his ribs had dulled to a persistent throb rather than the screaming agony of before. He could breathe without feeling like something inside him was tearing apart. Nona sat near the fire, grinding something in a stone mortar. She looked up when she heard him stir. "You back with the living?" she asked. Elias nodded slowly. He pushed himself upright, moving carefully, testing how much his body would allow. Everything hurt, but it was bearable hurt now. Survivable. "Isaiah," he said. "They killed him for something he didn't do." "I know." Nona set down her mortar and crossed to a trunk in the corner of the cabin. She opened it and pulled out a worn leather saddlebag, the same one Isaiah had been carrying that morning in the stables. "Found this before Rusk's men could take it. Figured it belonged with you." She handed it to Elias. The leather was soft from years of use, the buckles tarnished but functional. His hands shook as he opened it. Inside, folded carefully, were papers covered in Isaiah's handwriting. Elias pulled them out one by one, spreading them across the cot. Maps. Dozens of maps, each one meticulously detailed, showing routes through backwoods and creek beds and hidden trails that avoided main roads. Some maps had markings in what looked like code, symbols that meant nothing to Elias at first glance, but clearly held significance. Beneath the maps, he found a list written on a single sheet of paper, the ink slightly faded but still legible. Crow Plantation, Whitmore Estate, Ashford Fields, Gideon's Run, Kellerman Holdings, Riverside Manor, Blackwood Station, 7 plantations. 7 different locations spread across 3 counties. Elias's breath caught. He looked up at Nona. He was planning to free them all. Looks that way. More papers revealed coordination detail, signals using lantern patterns, meeting times tied to moon phases, contact names written in careful cipher. Isaiah had built a network, not just an escape plan for himself, but a coordinated liberation effort that would have moved hundreds of people to freedom simultaneously. The scope of it staggered Elias. His brother, who he'd thought was just dreaming too big, had been methodically constructing something revolutionary, something that could have changed everything. "Why didn't he tell me?" Elias's voice broke. Nona moved back to her seat by the fire. "Maybe he was trying to protect you. Maybe he wasn't sure you'd believe it was possible." She stirred the coals with an iron poker. "Don't matter now. Question is what you going to do about it?" Elias stared at the maps, at the careful notations in his brother's handwriting. Isaiah had died for this, died before he could see any of it come to pass. That afternoon, Elias managed to stand. His legs trembled, and Nona had to steady him at first, but after a few minutes, he found his balance. She helped him to the door, opened it slowly. Sunlight poured in, warm and golden. Elias stepped outside for the first time since the beating. The cabin sat at the edge of a clearing surrounded by pine trees. A small vegetable garden grew beside the house, neat rows showing Nona's careful attention. Beyond the garden, a simple fence enclosed a space where chickens scratched at the dirt. And there, hung carefully over one of the fence posts, was Isaiah's black oilskin duster. Elias walked toward it on unsteady legs, each step deliberate. The duster looked exactly as he remembered, long enough to brush the ground, dark as midnight, the fabric worn soft from years of wear. Isaiah had loved that coat, wore it every time he rode out at night. "Rescued it before they took the rest of his things," Nona said from behind him. "Figured burning it would be a waste." Elias reached out and touched the fabric. It was cool beneath his fingers, heavy with memories. Folks been talking, Nona continued, saying strange things happened the night Isaiah died. Some claim they saw a dark spirit near the hanging tree. Others say a rebellious cowboy survived somehow. That he's out there planning revenge. She paused. People see what they need to see. Elias lifted the duster from the fence post. It was heavier than he expected, the weight of it substantial in his hands. He thought about Isaiah wearing it, riding through darkness toward a freedom he never reached. He slipped his arms through the sleeves. The fit was close enough. Isaiah had been broader in the shoulders, but not by much. The fabric settled around Elias like a second skin, familiar despite never having worn it before. It wasn't vengeance he felt in that moment. Not yet. It was connection. Purpose. By sunset, Elias sat by the fire inside the cabin again. The maps spread out before him on the floor. He studied every detail. The routes Isaiah had marked, the coded symbols, the careful timing of each planned liberation. The work his brother had done was extraordinary, precise, beautiful in its complexity. Nona prepared a simple meal of cornbread and beans, setting a plate beside him without comment. Elias ate mechanically, his attention never leaving the papers. Hours passed. The fire burned low. Nona eventually retired to her sleeping corner, pulling a thin blanket over herself. But Elias stayed awake, memorizing routes, decoding patterns, understanding the scope of what Isaiah had tried to accomplish. He would finish it. All of it. Every plantation on that list would be freed, just as Isaiah had planned. Not for vengeance, for completion, for honoring what his brother had started. As the night deepened and the last coals glowed faintly in the hearth, Elias finally looked up from the maps. Nona was awake, watching him from her corner. "I need a horse," he said quietly. "And supplies, whatever you can spare." Nona nodded slowly. "I can get you that. I leave at first light." "I know." Dawn arrived cold and gray. Elias stood outside Nona's cabin, checking the saddlebags one final time. The bay gelding she'd brought him stood patiently, a strong animal with intelligent eyes and a calm temperament. Not the fastest horse Elias had ever worked with, but steady, reliable. Nona handed him a wrapped bundle of food, cornbread, dried meat, and apples. "Enough for 3 days if you're careful." "I'll bring the horse back when I can," Elias said. "Don't worry about the horse, worry about yourself." She studied his face, her expression unreadable. "You look like your brother now, wearing that coat." Elias touched the black oilskin duster, feeling its weight settle familiar across his shoulders. Maybe that's the point. He mounted the gelding smoothly, despite the lingering soreness in his ribs. Nona stepped back, watching as he turned the horse toward the tree line. "Purpose saves," she called after him. "Remember that, when the darkness comes." Elias didn't respond. He touched his heels to the gelding's sides and rode into the morning mist. The journey toward Red Harvest Plantation took him through terrain he knew well from years of ranch work. He followed deer trails and creek beds, avoiding main roads where patrols might spot him. The gelding moved quietly through the underbrush, responding to the slightest pressure from Elias's knees and subtle shifts in his weight. By mid-morning, the sun had burned through the mist. Elias stopped to water the horse at a shallow stream, letting the animal drink while he studied Isaiah's map. According to the notes, there should be a marking nearby, a coded symbol carved into a specific tree that confirmed the escape route. He found it after 10 minutes of searching. A tall oak standing apart from the others, its bark scarred with what looked like natural damage at first glance. But when Elias examined it closer, he saw the deliberate pattern, 3 diagonal cuts forming an arrow pointing northwest, with a small circle carved beneath, Isaiah's symbol, exactly as described in the papers. Elias traced the carving with his fingers, imagining his brother standing in this same spot, marking the route for people who would need to travel in darkness without maps. The attention to detail moved something in Elias's chest. A mixture of pride and grief so sharp it made breathing difficult. He remounted and continued northwest. By afternoon, he could see Red Harvest Plantation in the distance. Elias circled wide, approaching from the east where heavy forest provided cover. He tied the gelding deep in the trees and moved forward on foot, watching the layout carefully. The plantation was smaller than Crow's, but more heavily supervised. 2 patrols walked the perimeter at regular intervals, their routes overlapping near the slave quarters. Elias counted the men, noted their weapons, observed how they moved. 1 patrol changed at sunset, the other continued through the night. He waited in the forest as afternoon faded to evening, watched the enslaved workers return from the fields, saw them herded into the quarters for the night. Lanterns were lit. Doors were locked from the outside. Darkness came slowly, then all at once. Elias waited another hour, letting full night settle before he moved. He left his hat with the horse, the wide brim would create a recognizable silhouette, and pulled the duster's collar up around his neck. The black fabric made him nearly invisible in the darkness. He approached the quarters from the blind side, where the angle of the buildings blocked sightlines from the main house. The first lantern hung on a post near the door. Elias picked up a smooth stone from the ground, judged the distance, and threw. The stone hit the lantern dead center. Glass shattered. The light went out. Voices called out from inside the quarters. The patrol changed direction, moving toward the noise. Elias used the distraction to reach the workhouse where the plow horses were kept. He opened the gate silently, then slapped one of the horses hard on the rump. It bolted out, whinnying loudly, crashing into fence posts as it ran. The other horses followed, spooked by the first one's panic. More shouting. The patrols split up, trying to corral the loose animals. Elias moved to the quarters. The locks on the doors were simple external bolts, easy to slide open once he reached them. He opened the first door and stepped inside. 30 faces stared at him in the darkness, eyes wide with fear and confusion. "Isaiah Crow sent me," Elias said quietly. "Anyone who wants to leave, follow me now. Stay silent." One man stood, then another. Within seconds, everyone in the quarters was moving. Elias led them outside, guiding them along the route he'd scouted earlier. Behind them, the patrols were still chasing horses, their lanterns bobbing in the distance. By the time they realized the quarters were empty, Elias and the freed workers were already disappearing into the forest. They moved in near total silence. Elias had cut the shackles on those who wore them using a small pry bar hidden in the duster's deep pocket. Another tool Isaiah had apparently kept ready. The iron fell away quietly, and people rubbed their wrists, their ankles, their expressions showing disbelief. "Who are you?" a woman whispered as they walked. Before Elias could answer, an older man spoke up. "He's the Panther. The one they've been whispering about. See how he moves in the dark?" "Ain't no panther," another voice said. "He's a spirit, come to avenge Isaiah Crow." "He's real as you and me," the first man insisted. "But he moves like a ghost, just the same." Elias said nothing. Let them whisper. Let them create whatever story helped them believe escape was possible. They reached the wooded ridge near midnight. The group settled into the dense underbrush, exhausted but safe for the moment. Elias told them to rest while he doubled back toward the plantation. "You going back there?" the woman asked, alarmed. "Need to check something." He returned to Red Harvest, moving even more carefully than before. The patrols had discovered the empty quarters and were searching the immediate area with torches, but they were looking in the wrong direction. Elias slipped past them to the administrative cabin where the plantation kept its records. The door was locked. Elias forced it with the pry bar, the wood splintering quietly. Inside, he found ledgers, correspondence, documents detailing crop yields and slave inventories. He searched quickly, knowing he had limited time. In the bottom drawer of the main desk, beneath a stack of purchase orders, he found a folded letter. The handwriting made his breath catch. Isaiah's plan proceeds as expected. Red harvest will be first. Monitor closely and report movement. The letter wasn't signed, but the handwriting was familiar. Someone who'd practiced writing in secret, whose letters had an unusual slant that came from learning to write left-handed while pretending to be right-handed. Someone who'd known Isaiah's plan in detail, known the order of the liberation, known enough to track progress. Elias folded the letter carefully and put it in his pocket. His hands were shaking. Isaiah had been sabotaged, intentionally, by someone inside the network. He left the cabin and returned to the ridge where the freed workers waited. At dawn, he led them northwest through terrain that matched Isaiah's maps perfectly. By late afternoon, they reached a farmstead run by a Quaker family who asked no questions and simply opened their doors. Elias stayed only long enough to ensure everyone was fed and sheltered. As he prepared to leave, one of the farmers approached him with a troubled expression. "You should see this," the man said, holding out a paper. "Found it posted in town this morning." It was a wanted notice. Fresh ink, clear printing. Wanted Elias Crow for organizing rebellion across multiple plantations, dead or alive, $500 reward. Below the text was a detailed physical description. Height, build, the scar on his left hand from a horse bite years ago. Information no stranger could know. Information only someone close to him would have noticed. Elias stared at the notice, his vision tunneling. Someone had given his name to the authorities. Someone who knew him personally. Someone who'd been close enough to observe details about his appearance. The same someone who'd sabotaged Isaiah. Evening fell as Elias rode away from the safe house, the wanted notice folded in his saddlebag alongside the letter he'd found. The bay gelding carried him deeper into the wilderness, away from roads and towns where his face might be recognized. He stopped near a creek as darkness gathered, pulled out the wanted notice, and read it again by fading light, studying every word, every detail that revealed how much the traitor knew. "Someone in the network sold my brother out," he whispered to the empty forest, and now they were coming for him too. Dawn broke cold and gray across the prairie. Elias woke stiff from sleeping on hard ground, his body protesting the days of constant movement. He'd camped far from the road, deep in a stand of cottonwoods, where his fire wouldn't be visible. The bay gelding stood nearby, cropping grass, unbothered by the chill. Elias rolled his blanket tight and secured it behind the saddle. His movements were automatic, practiced, but his eyes never stopped moving. He scanned the tree line, the distant ridges, the open grassland stretching endlessly in every direction. Anywhere a rider might appear, anywhere a bounty hunter might be waiting. The wanted notice had changed everything. Before, he'd been invisible, just another black cowboy traveling through frontier territory. Now he was marked, hunted. Every town, every settlement, every stranger posed a potential threat. He mounted and turned west, following the route marked in Isaiah's papers. The second safe house was a full day's ride if he pushed hard. Thatcher Farm, according to the notes. A family of abolitionists who'd been sheltering fugitives for years. The morning stretched long and tense. The prairie offered no cover, just endless rolling grass broken occasionally by rocky outcroppings. Elias kept the gelding at a steady pace, fast enough to cover ground, but not so fast it would tire the horse. He rode with his right hand resting near the rifle strapped to his saddle, his body coiled tight with readiness. Every bird that took flight made his pulse spike. Every dark shape in the distance demanded his full attention until he confirmed it was just a boulder, just a dead tree, just shadows playing tricks. The sun climbed higher. Heat began rising from the earth in shimmering waves. By midday, Elias spotted the farm. It sat in a shallow valley, protected on three sides by low hills. A main house, a large barn, several smaller outbuildings. Smoke rose from the chimney. Laundry hung on lines between the buildings, a good sign that families were living there, not just passing through. He approached slowly, giving anyone watching time to recognize him as a single rider, not a threat. As he drew closer, he saw people working in the fields, children playing near the barn. The normalcy of it felt almost painful after days of running. A woman emerged from the house as he dismounted. She was tall, dark-skinned, maybe 30 years old. She wore a simple dress with an apron, her hair wrapped in a bright yellow cloth. Her posture was straight, her expression guarded but not hostile. "You're Elias Crow," she said. Not a question. "I am. Aurelia Carter. Isaiah told me you might come." She studied him carefully, taking in the black duster, the dust on his boots, the tension in his shoulders. "You look like a man being chased." "I am." She nodded once, accepting this. "Your brother spoke highly of you. Said you were the best horseman he'd ever known. Said you had a good heart." The past tense cut through Elias like a blade. "Isaiah had enough good heart for both of us. Come inside. You'll want to see the families from Red Harvest. They've been asking about you." Elias followed her into the main house. The interior was simple but clean. A large table dominated the front room, surrounded by mismatched chairs. Several people sat there, including faces Elias recognized from the first liberation. They looked different now, rested, fed, wearing clothes that fit properly instead of the rags they'd worn on the plantation. The woman from the quarters stood and approached him. "You came back. Said I would check on everyone. We didn't believe it. Thought once we was free, you'd disappear like smoke." Elias didn't know how to respond to that. He'd never thought about what came after the liberations. His focus had been entirely on executing Isaiah's plan, one plantation at a time. Aurelia served him cornbread and beans. While he ate, she explained how the safe house worked. The families helped with farm work in exchange for shelter. She taught reading lessons every afternoon to anyone who wanted to learn. They used coded signals to communicate with other safe houses along the network. Lanterns in specific windows, colored cloths hung in certain patterns. Isaiah designed most of the signals, she said. He had a mind for details like that, always thinking 3 steps ahead. He was good at planning. Elias agreed quietly. "And you? What are you good at?" The question caught him off guard. "Breaking horses, tracking, staying alive." Isaiah was a builder. "You're a fighter." Aurelia's tone wasn't accusatory, just observant. "Those are different skills, different purposes." Elias met her eyes. "Right now, fighting's what's needed." "Is it? Or is that just what feels right because you're angry?" He had no answer for that. The afternoon passed slowly. Aurelia excused herself to teach her reading lesson, and Elias wandered the property, speaking quietly with the people sheltering there. Most conversations were brief, expressions of gratitude, questions about whether more liberations were planned, concerns about safety. Then he found Jonas Pike. The man was older, maybe 50, with silver threading through his hair and deep lines around his eyes. He sat on a bench near the barn, whittling a piece of wood with a small knife. He looked up as Elias approached. "You're Isaiah's brother," Jonas said. "I am. He was a good man. Smart. Kind. Didn't deserve what happened." Elias sat down beside him. "You knew him well." "Well enough. We worked together on the Garrison plantation before I was sold off. That was years back, but we kept in touch through travelers. He'd send messages sometimes, coded letters hidden in supply shipments. Did he mention his plans to you? The liberations?" Jonas was quiet for a moment, his knife pausing mid-cut. "Not directly, but I knew something was building. He asked careful questions. Who could be trusted? Who had access to maps? Who knew the patrol routes? Anyone he didn't trust?" The older man's expression shifted, became cautious. "Why are you asking?" "Because someone betrayed him. Someone who knew his plans gave him up to the men who killed him. Jonas's hands stilled completely. He stared at the piece of wood, not meeting Elias's eyes. There was one man, Jordan Hale, from the third plantation you freed. I saw them arguing once, maybe 2 months before Isaiah died. It got heated. Isaiah walked away looking troubled, and Jordan looked. He trailed off. Looked how? Like a man nursing a grudge. Like something had been said that couldn't be unsaid. The name settled into Elias's mind with weight. Jordan Hale, third plantation. Someone Isaiah had planned to liberate. Someone who should have been grateful, arguing with him weeks before the lynching. It wasn't confirmation, but it was something. Evening came, and Elias helped with dinner preparations, carrying water and splitting firewood. After the meal, as families settled in for the night, he walked the property's perimeter. Old habit from years of ranch work. Check the fences, watch for problems, ensure everything was secure. That's when he found the hoof prints. They were fresh, maybe a day old, hidden in soft earth near the eastern fence line. A single horse, shod recently judging by the clean impressions. The prints came from the direction of the main road, stopped near a gap in the trees where someone could observe the farm unseen, then turned back the way they'd come. Someone had been watching. Elias followed the tracks until they disappeared onto harder ground. His jaw tightened. The safe house was supposed to be secret, known only to trusted contacts within the network. He returned to the barn and found Aurelia inside, organizing supplies by lantern light. "Someone scouted this place yesterday," he said without preamble. "Single rider. Watched from the East Ridge, then left." Her face went pale. "You're sure?" "I know tracks. Could be a traveler, someone lost." "Could be. But travelers don't hide in trees to watch a farm." He moved closer, keeping his voice low so it wouldn't carry to the main house. "This network isn't as secure as Isaiah thought. Someone's sharing information they shouldn't have. So we run? Abandon the safe house because of one set of hoof prints? I'm saying be careful. Don't assume everyone who claims to support this cause actually does." Aurelia's expression hardened. "Fear makes us weak, Elias. If we question everyone, trust no one, we become isolated." Isaiah understood that. He built this network on faith in people, and faith got him killed. The words hung in the air between them, sharp and ugly. "You're letting anger guide you," Aurelia said quietly. "I understand why. I lost my husband to the same violence that took Isaiah. But rage without strategy is just destruction. It doesn't build anything, doesn't protect anyone. Right now, I'm not trying to build. I'm trying to finish what Isaiah started. And then what? After the 7 plantations are freed, after you've burned down everyone who stood in your way, what comes next?" Elias had no answer. He hadn't thought that far ahead, hadn't let himself imagine a future beyond completing Isaiah's mission. They stood in the barn's dim light, the distance between them feeling wider than the few feet of physical space. "Get some rest," Aurelia finally said. "You look like you haven't slept properly in days." She left without waiting for a response. Elias climbed into the hayloft, spreading his blanket in the loose straw. The barn smelled of horses and dried grass, familiar and comforting in a way that made his chest ache. He lay down, but didn't close his eyes, staring instead at the dark rafters overhead. Sleep came eventually, uninvited and troubled. In the dream, he was back at Crow Plantation. Isaiah stood beneath the hanging tree, the noose already around his neck. But this time, when Elias tried to run forward, his legs wouldn't move. He was rooted in place, forced to watch as his brother's eyes found his across the distance. Isaiah's mouth moved, forming words Elias couldn't hear. The rope fell. Elias woke gasping, his heart hammering. Gray pre-dawn light filtered through gaps in the barn walls. He'd slept maybe 3 hours. His body felt heavy, exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with physical exertion. He descended from the loft and found Aurelia already awake, preparing breakfast in the main house. She said nothing about their argument, just handed him coffee and cornbread. "I'm leaving this morning," Elias said. "I know. I'll come back. Check on everyone." Aurelia looked at him for a long moment. "Will you? Or will this path you're on consume you completely before you get the chance?" He didn't have an answer for that either. By late morning, Elias had resupplied and was ready to ride. Several people came out to say goodbye. Jonas Pike approached last, pressing something into Elias's hand. "You find Jordan Hale," the older man said quietly. "You ask him about the argument, about what Isaiah said that made him so angry." Elias nodded and pocketed the small carved figure Jonas had given him. A horse, whittled smooth and perfect. He rode east, leaving Thatcher Farm behind. The rolling hills swallowed the buildings quickly, and within an hour he was alone again with just prairie and sky. That's when he saw the smoke. 3 columns rising in the distance, evenly spaced. Not cooking fires, not brush burning. A signal. Isaiah's coded warning for danger from within. The smoke signals faded behind him as Elias pushed the gelding harder. Late morning sun beat down on the prairie, turning the air thick and heavy. He rode east for 2 hours before the landscape shifted. Fewer open grasslands, more wooded patches, and cultivated fields stretching toward the horizon. Willow Bend Plantation appeared in the distance just after noon. Isaiah's notes described it as a mid-sized operation, maybe 40 people working cotton fields that bordered a dense willow grove. The main house sat on a low hill, white-painted wood gleaming in the sunlight. Slave quarters clustered behind it in neat rows. Elias dismounted a quarter-mile out and moved on foot, keeping to the tree line. He spent an hour observing patrol patterns. 2 armed overseers circled the property every 30 minutes. Workers moved through the fields in organized rows, supervised by a 3rd man on horseback who carried a rifle across his saddle. Elias studied the terrain carefully. The willow grove pressed close to the quarters. Beyond that, open pasture where horses grazed. Maybe 20 animals, scattered and relaxed in the afternoon heat. A stampede could work. He waited until mid-afternoon, when the heat was at its peak and the patrols had settled into lazy predictability. Then he circled wide through the grove until he reached the pasture's far edge. The horses lifted their heads as he approached, but didn't spook. He'd learned long ago how to move around animals without triggering panic. He selected a nervous mare, one whose ears kept swiveling at every sound. She'd be easiest to startle. Elias positioned himself downwind, gathered several smooth stones from the creek bed, then waited for the patrol to complete its circuit. When the overseer disappeared around the main house, Elias threw the first stone hard into the brush behind the herd. The mare jumped, snorted. Her agitation spread to the nearest horses. He threw another stone, then another. The mare bolted, and the herd followed, 20 horses suddenly thundering across the pasture toward the plantation buildings. Chaos erupted. Overseers shouted. Workers stopped mid-row to stare. The horseman's supervisor wheeled his mount around, trying to head off the stampede before it trampled the vegetable gardens behind the quarters. Elias moved fast. He slipped through the willow grove and into the quarters, while everyone's attention focused on the panicked horses. People stared at him, a stranger in a black duster appearing from nowhere, but he didn't give them time to question. "Isaiah Crow sent me," he said quietly, to the first group he encountered. "Follow the willows north. Stay low. Move now." The name worked like magic. Isaiah's network had spread word, even here. People began moving immediately, parents grabbing children, elders helping each other toward the grove. Elias guided them in small groups, keeping them hidden while the overseers struggled with the horses. By the time the stampede was finally contained, 37 people had disappeared into the wilderness. Elias stayed until sunset, ensuring the escapees reached the first safe checkpoint marked on Isaiah's map. Then he rode hard for Kerrigan Hall, arriving well after dark. This plantation was larger, more security. Lanterns hung from poles around the quarters, and armed patrols moved constantly. Elias couldn't use the same tactics here. He studied the situation from a nearby ridge, considering his options. The stables sat separate from the main buildings, close enough to the quarters that workers could be called to handle late-night horse emergencies, but isolated enough that guards didn't patrol it constantly. A traveling stable hand could move freely there without raising suspicion. Elias removed the black duster and bundled it carefully, hiding it in his saddlebag. He dirtied his clothes, rubbed soil into his hair and face, then rode casually down to the plantation's main gate. The guard stopped him with a raised hand. "State your business." "Stable hand looking for work. Heard you might need help with a lame mare." Elias kept his voice easy, relaxed. "Rode in from the Hutchins place, 2 counties over. They said you pay fair for skilled hands." The guard studied him suspiciously, but didn't see a threat. Just another drifter looking for wages. "Stables are that way. Talk to Moss. He'll decide if we need you." Elias nodded his thanks and rode to the stables. Moss was an older black man, heavy-set and tired-looking. He barely glanced at Elias before pointing toward a stall. "Mare's got a stone bruise. You fix it, you can sleep in the loft tonight. We'll talk wages in the morning." "Appreciated." Elias worked on the mare for an hour, making a show of examining her hoof and applying a poultice. While he worked, people came and went. Workers finishing late chores, guards checking security, someone delivering feed. He waited until well past midnight when the plantation finally quieted. Then he moved through the quarters with careful precision. He'd hidden lockpicks in his boot, tools he'd taken from Red Harvest's administrative cabin. The shackles here were newer, harder to manipulate, but his hands had learned patience over years of delicate work with horses. One by one, he slipped chains off sleeping workers. When they woke and saw him, he whispered the same message. "Isaiah Crow sent me. Follow the northern fence line to the oak grove. Wait there!" By dawn, 42 people had vanished from Kerrigan Hall. Elias retrieved his duster and rode north, exhaustion pulling at him but satisfaction warming his chest. 2 more plantations freed. 2 more steps toward completing Isaiah's mission. The myth was growing. He could feel it in how people reacted to his presence. The mixture of hope and fear. The whispered name, Black Panther, spreading faster than he could ride. Morning brought him to a shallow creek, where a temporary settlement had formed. Maybe 60 people clustered there, families from multiple liberations gathering before moving to more permanent safe locations. Elias helped distribute supplies and answer questions about the route ahead. But he noticed something wrong. People were afraid. Not of patrols or bounty hunters. They were afraid of each other. Conversations stopped when certain individuals approached. Small groups formed, excluding others. He overheard fragments. "Trading information. Someone's selling us out. Can't trust anyone anymore." Then he saw Jordan Hale. The man stood near the creek, laughing with a group of younger escapees, his demeanor easy and friendly. When he spotted Elias, his face brightened, and he walked over immediately. "Elias Crow himself," Jordan said warmly, extending his hand. "Heard you freed Willowbend and Kerrigan Hall in one day. That's impressive work." Elias shook his hand briefly. "Just finishing what Isaiah started." Isaiah would be proud. Really proud. Jordan's smile didn't quite reach his eyes. "How many more plantations you planning to hit? However many it takes." Sure. Just wondering about timing, you know? Some folks here are asking when they should expect family members from other places. Trying to coordinate reunions." Jordan's tone stayed casual, but his questions felt pointed. "You got a schedule worked out? Know which safe houses you'll use next?" Something cold settled in Elias's gut. "Why you asking?" "Just helping people plan, keeping spirits up." Jordan shrugged easily. "This whole operation only works if we communicate, right?" Share information so everyone knows what's happening? Information gets shared on a need-to-know basis. Of course, of course. I'm just saying, if you need someone to help coordinate messages between groups, I'm good at that kind of thing. Isaiah knew I had a talent for keeping track of details. Elias studied Jordan's face. The man was smooth, confident, showing no obvious signs of deception. But something felt wrong, like a horse that looked calm, but had tension coiling beneath its skin, ready to explode at the wrong moment. "I'll keep that in mind," Elias said neutrally. As afternoon shadows lengthened, Elias pulled aside Martha Elgin, an older woman who'd been freed from the fourth plantation. She'd worked in plantation houses most of her life, quietly observing the dynamics between enslaved people and their captors. "You knew Isaiah?" he asked. "Knew of him. Everyone did. He was careful, though. Didn't trust easy." "What about Jordan Hale?" Martha's expression tightened. "What about him?" "I heard they argued once, months back." She was quiet for a long moment, glancing around to ensure no one could overhear. "They did. Jordan's family. There was an incident, a scandal involving his sister and someone else's husband. Isaiah found out about it and exposed what was happening because it threatened the network's security. The scandal destroyed Jordan's family. His sister took her own life because of the shame." Elias felt pieces clicking into place. Jordan blamed Isaiah. Jordan blamed everyone, but yes, especially Isaiah. He said Isaiah could have handled it quietly, could have protected his sister instead of exposing her. Martha met his eyes. "I never trusted Jordan after that. Man nursing that kind of hurt, that kind of resentment. It changes people. Why didn't you say something before?" "To who? Isaiah was dead. You were busy freeing plantations, and I had no proof Jordan did anything wrong. Just a feeling." Elias thanked her quietly and walked away, his mind working through the implications. Jordan had motive. Jordan had been asking suspicious questions. Jordan appeared at settlements with timing that felt too convenient. But suspicion wasn't proof. That evening, Elias made camp alone under a cottonwood tree 1/2 mile from the creek settlement. He built a small fire and spread Isaiah's map across his lap. Studying it by flickering firelight, he marked the plantations he'd liberated, noted which ones had been targeted heavily by bounty hunters afterward, drew lines connecting Jordan's known movements to those locations. The pattern wasn't definitive, but it was there. A twig snapped in the darkness beyond the firelight. Elias's hand moved to his revolver in one smooth motion. He kicked dirt over the flames, plunging the camp into blackness, and rolled sideways into deeper shadow. Silence pressed down. His heartbeat pounded in his ears. Someone was out there, watching. The night passed slowly. Elias didn't sleep. He stayed in the shadows beyond his extinguished campfire, listening to the darkness, waiting for movement that never came. When dawn finally broke across the prairie, washing everything in pale gold light, he was already saddled and riding northwest. His body ached from tension and lack of rest, but he pushed forward anyway. Isaiah had once mentioned a place, a sanctuary hidden so well that even bounty hunters who searched for years never found it. A valley where freed people built something lasting. Elias needed to see if it truly existed. The morning stretched long as he traveled through rolling grassland, following vague directions and older rumors. The sun climbed higher, warming his back through the black duster. He stopped once near mid-morning to water his horse at a creek, studying the landscape for signs of pursuit. Nothing moved behind him except wind through tall grass. By afternoon, the terrain changed. The flat prairie gave way to rocky ridges covered in cedar and scrub oak. The air grew cooler, carrying scents of pine and water. He followed a narrow game trail that wound between stone outcroppings, climbing steadily upward. Then the trail opened onto a ridge overlooking a valley below. Elias pulled his horse to a stop and stared. The Valley of Breath spread beneath him like something from a dream. A wide basin protected by natural stone walls on three sides, with a single hidden entrance through the ridges. A stream ran down the center, feeding gardens and small fields. Wooden cabins dotted the landscape in organized clusters. Smoke rose from cook fires. Clotheslines stretched between trees. And everywhere, people moved freely. Children chased each other through open meadows, their laughter carrying on the wind. Women tended garden rows, talking and singing while they worked. Men repaired fences and built new structures, their movements unhurried and purposeful. Elders sat beneath shade trees, watching grandchildren play. No shackles, no overseers, no fear. Elias felt something crack open inside his chest. He rode down slowly, and people noticed his approach. A few men came forward cautiously, but when they saw his face and the black duster, recognition sparked immediately. "That's him," someone whispered. "That's the Black Panther." Word spread quickly. By the time Elias reached the valley floor, a small crowd had gathered. An older man stepped forward, his bearing calm and dignified, his eyes sharp with intelligence. "Elias Crow," the man said warmly. "We've been hoping you'd find us. I'm Samuel Drayton. I run things here, such as they need running. This place—" Elias struggled to find words. "Isaiah mentioned it once, but I didn't think. Your brother helped us establish this valley 5 years ago, brought the first families here himself. He believed in building something permanent, not just running forever." Samuel gestured toward the settlement. "Everything you see, this is Isaiah's dream made real, and you've been completing his work, bringing more people to freedom so they could find their way here." Elias dismounted slowly, still taking in the impossible sight. 300 people? 312 as of this morning. Families from 6 different states. We farm, we teach, we govern ourselves. We're building a future. Samuel placed a hand on Elias's shoulder. "Thank you for finishing what Isaiah started, for giving these people the chance to reach this place." The crowd pressed closer, and Elias recognized faces, people he'd freed from Red Harvest, from Willow Bend, from Kerrigan Hall. They thanked him with tears in their eyes, gripping his hands, telling him what freedom meant to their children. He spent the afternoon walking through the settlement, overwhelmed by the normalcy of it all. Children learning to read in an outdoor classroom, women weaving baskets, men building a new cabin, arguing good-naturedly about the best way to brace the frame. Someone asked if he knew anything about horses, and Elias found himself teaching a group of young people how to handle the valley's small herd. He showed them how to approach carefully, how to read a horse's mood from its ears and posture, how to gain trust through patience. The work felt clean, simple, good. As evening approached, bringing cooler air and lengthening shadows, a commotion near the valley entrance drew attention. Elias looked up to see Aurelia Carter riding in on a gray mare, her expression tired but determined. She spotted him immediately and rode over, dismounting with visible relief. "I followed the coded messages from safe houses," she explained. "I wanted to see if this place was real, if what you were doing actually led somewhere instead of just more running." "It's real," Elias said quietly. Aurelia looked around the valley, her eyes widening as she took in the scope of what existed here. Children played nearby. Elders sat talking peacefully. Gardens grew in neat rows. The stream sparkled in golden evening light. "I was wrong about you," she said finally, her voice soft. "I thought your methods would only bring more violence, more pain. But this," she gestured at the settlement, "this is hope. Real, lasting hope. You created this by acting when others only talked about freedom. Isaiah created this. I just helped people reach it. You did more than that. You showed them freedom was possible. You made them believe." She smiled, and it transformed her face. Maybe there's a future beyond just surviving. Maybe we can actually build something that lasts. That night, the valley gathered for a communal meal. Long tables stretched beneath the stars, loaded with food grown from their own soil, prepared by their own hands, shared freely among free people. Lanterns hung from tree branches, casting warm light across hundreds of faces. After the meal ended, someone started singing. A freedom spiritual, old and powerful. Others joined in, voices rising together in harmonies that seemed to fill the entire valley. Elias sat among them, listening, feeling something he hadn't felt since before Isaiah's death. Peace. Genuine, uncomplicated peace. Later, as the singing continued, and children grew sleepy in their parents' arms, Elias walked down to the stream that ran through the valley's center. The water moved gently over smooth stones, reflecting starlight. Aurelia joined him, standing close enough that their shoulders nearly touched. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for creating this refuge, for proving it could exist." Elias watched the water flow, thinking about all the roads that had led here, the violence and fear, the desperate rescues and close escapes, the constant running, the endless vigilance, the weight of knowing one mistake could cost lives. All of it had led to this valley, these people, this moment of genuine safety and hope. "Maybe this is enough," he whispered. Aurelia looked at him, understanding what he meant. Maybe the mission was complete. Maybe he could stop now, could lay down the black duster and the endless pursuit of justice through liberation. Maybe he could stay here, teach people about horses, help build cabins, live something resembling a normal life. "Maybe it is," she agreed softly. The stream murmured its ancient song. Stars wheeled overhead in their eternal patterns. Somewhere behind them, the valley sang together under lantern light. Free people celebrating freedom in a hidden sanctuary that seemed blessed by something larger than human struggle. For the first time since Isaiah died, Elias allowed himself to imagine a future that didn't end in violence. Elias woke to thunder rolling across the valley. His eyes opened in darkness, body tense before his mind fully caught up. He lay still in the small cabin Samuel had given him, listening to the sound grow louder. Then he realized it wasn't thunder at all. It was gunfire. He rolled from the bed and grabbed his boots, pulling them on as shouts erupted outside. Through the window he saw orange flashes in the pre-dawn darkness, muzzle fire from multiple directions, concentrated and coordinated. This was an assault. Elias burst through the door into chaos. People ran in every direction, carrying children, dragging elders, screaming warnings to neighbors. Flames already licked up the sides of 3 cabins on the valley's eastern edge. Mounted men charged through the settlement, rifles raised, shouting orders to surrender. Marshals, bounty hunters, plantation enforcers, all of them working together in perfect coordination. "Everyone to the ridge tunnel!" Samuel's voice boomed above the confusion. "Get the children out first!" Elias sprinted toward the center of the settlement, where families clustered in terrified groups. He scanned faces desperately, searching for Aurelia. He found her near the schoolhouse, helping an elderly woman carry 2 small children. Her face was pale but focused. "Aurelia!" Elias grabbed her arm. "You need to lead the children to the tunnel Samuel built, the one on the North Ridge, behind the Cedar Grove. I'm not leaving people behind. You're the only one they'll follow without question. They trust you. Get them out." He gripped her shoulders, forcing her to meet his eyes. "Please, I'll buy you time." She stared at him for 3 rapid heartbeats, then nodded sharply. "Don't you dare die here. Go. Now." Aurelia turned and began gathering children, her voice cutting through panic with clear authority. "Everyone under 12 years old, come to me. We're going somewhere safe, but we must move quickly and quietly." Elias watched long enough to see her lead the first group toward the North Ridge. Then he turned back to face the attackers. A bounty hunter on horseback charged toward a cluster of fleeing families. Elias grabbed a fence rail and swung hard, catching the man across the chest and knocking him from his saddle. The horse bolted. Elias didn't wait to see if the man rose. He was already moving toward the next threat. The violence came in desperate bursts. Defensive, strategic, buying minutes for people to escape. He used smoke from burning cabins as cover, led groups of families toward hidden paths, blocked narrow passages with overturned wagons to slow the attackers' advance. But with each passing minute, a terrible realization grew stronger. The marshals knew everything. They knew about the ridge tunnel and posted guards there within 20 minutes of the assault's start. They knew which cabins housed the settlement's leaders and targeted them first. They knew the blind spots in the valley's natural defenses and positioned sharpshooters to cover them perfectly. Only someone intimately familiar with the valley could have provided such detailed information. The sun began rising, washing the chaos in harsh morning light. Smoke drifted across the settlement in thick gray clouds. Elias crouched behind a stone wall, watching marshals herd captured refugees into a central clearing. That's when he saw Jordan Hale. Jordan stood among the marshals, not bound or threatened, but speaking freely with a hard-faced man wearing a federal badge. Jordan pointed toward specific cabins, gestured toward the ridge paths, nodded when marshals asked him questions. Collaborating. Openly collaborating. Elias felt something cold and sharp settle in his chest. He moved through the smoke carefully, circling around burning structures, getting closer to where Jordan stood guard over a group of captured refugees. Men and women Elias had personally freed from Plantations weeks earlier. He approached from Jordan's blind side, emerging from smoke like a ghost. "Jordan!" Jordan spun, surprise flashing across his face before settling into something harder, something almost like satisfaction. "Elias, still alive. I honestly thought they'd have shot you by now. You did this. You told them everything." Elias's voice came out flat, drained of emotion. "You sold out the valley. Sold out your own people." "My own people?" Jordan laughed bitterly. "These aren't my people, Elias. They stopped being my people when your brother destroyed my family 5 years ago. Isaiah never destroyed anyone who didn't deserve it." "Didn't deserve it?" Jordan's face twisted with rage. "He exposed my relationship with Clara Jennings, told the whole community about our affair, knowing her husband would kill her for it, knowing I'd lose everything. She died because of Isaiah's righteous truth-telling. My children won't speak to me because of what he revealed. I lost my family, my reputation, everything, all because Isaiah Crow decided his moral purity was more important than people's lives. So you framed him for stealing that mare. You got him lynched. I got justice for what he took from me." Jordan stepped closer, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper. "And when I learned about his grand liberation network, I saw opportunity. Real opportunity. You want to know the truth, Elias? I've been selling information to bounty hunters for 2 years. Every escape route, every safe house, every coded signal. I knew them all because Isaiah trusted me. And I've been trading that knowledge for coin and leverage ever since he died. You sold out hundreds of people for money? I sold out hundreds of people because it gave me power I never had as an enslaved man, and because every person I helped capture was one less person following Isaiah's legacy. This valley?" Jordan gestured at the burning settlement around them. "This was his dream, made real. And now I get to watch it burn." Elias moved forward, rage building white-hot in his chest. But before he could reach Jordan, something hard cracked against the back of his skull. Pain exploded through his head. His knees buckled. The ground rushed up to meet him. Darkness swallowed everything. When consciousness returned, the sun hung low in the western sky, painting everything in harsh orange light. Elias lay face down in dirt, head throbbing, dried blood crusting his neck. He pushed himself up slowly, the world tilting and spinning around him. The valley was ruined, cabins reduced to smoking frames, gardens trampled into mud, fences torn down. The stream ran cloudy with ash. Bodies lay scattered. Not many, but enough to make his stomach twist. Most of the survivors had been captured and marched away, their fates uncertain. A few people remained, picking through wreckage with hollow eyes. One of them, a man named Thomas, who Elias had freed from Willow Bend, looked up as Elias approached. "You should leave," Thomas said quietly, "before the survivors decide to blame you for bringing that man into our circle. I didn't know Jordan was—" "You trusted him. You brought him here. That's enough." Thomas turned away. "We followed the Black Panther because we thought he could keep us safe, but all you brought was destruction." The words hit harder than the rifle butt. Elias opened his mouth to respond, but found nothing to say. Thomas was right. He had trusted Jordan. He had failed to see the betrayal until it was too late. He had failed Isaiah's dream. Elias walked through the ruins, searching for Aurelia. He found her near the remnants of the schoolhouse, helping an injured woman drink water from a canteen. She saw him approach and stood slowly, her expression distant and cold. "Aurelia, don't." She held up one hand. "Just don't, Elias. I didn't know Jordan would—" "You should have known. You should have been more careful. Should have questioned people more thoroughly. Should have protected what Isaiah built, instead of just adding more people to something you didn't understand." Her voice cracked slightly. "I can't follow someone who brings destruction in his wake. I can't watch more people die because you're too focused on vengeance to see the traitors standing right beside you." She walked away without looking back, leaving Elias standing alone among the ashes. Evening fell slowly, shadows stretching across the ruined valley. Most survivors departed in small groups, heading toward other safe houses or family in distant territories. They gave Elias wide berths as they passed, their fear and anger palpable even in silence. He wandered the settlement as darkness came, picking through wreckage. Near what had been Samuel's cabin, he found a piece of charred paper, part of Isaiah's original map. The edges burned black, but the center still legible. Elias sank to his knees, holding the fragment carefully. He had completed all 7 liberations. He had brought hundreds to freedom. He had built nothing permanent, created no lasting safety. The valley, Isaiah's greatest achievement, lay in ruins because Elias had been too blind to see betrayal until it destroyed everything. Fires still smoldered throughout the settlement, sending thin smoke into the night sky. Elias knelt alone among them, the charred map clutched in his hands, the black duster heavy on his shoulders. He whispered into the darkness, "This ends with Jordan." Sunrise came cold and merciless. Elias stood among the ruins of the valley, watching morning light spread across scorched earth and collapsed structures. His throat burned with thirst. His head pounded from the blow he'd taken. Every muscle in his body felt heavy with exhaustion that went deeper than physical fatigue. The valley was silent now. The last survivors had departed during the night, leaving only emptiness and ash. He had spent hours kneeling in the dirt, clutching that charred fragment of Isaiah's map, letting grief and rage twist through him in equal measure. But as dawn broke, something else emerged, something harder and colder than emotion: purpose. Jordan Hale had destroyed Isaiah's dream, had betrayed hundreds of people for coin and revenge, had orchestrated the valley's destruction with calculated precision. This could not stand unanswered. Elias walked to the stream, now running clearer after the night. He drank deeply, washing ash from his face and hands. The water tasted bitter, but it cleared his mind. He filled his canteen methodically, checking his supplies with practiced efficiency. By the time the sun cleared the eastern ridge, Elias was moving. Mid-morning found him crouched at the valley's southern entrance, studying the ground with the careful attention his father had taught him years ago when breaking horses on the ranch. The marshals and bounty hunters had left obvious tracks. Dozens of horses, wagons, boot prints churned into mud. But Elias focused on specific details, the small signs that told deeper stories. A hoof print with a distinctive crack across the left shoe. He'd seen that print near the captured refugees yesterday. The horse belonged to one of Jordan's collaborators. Broken branches at chest height, snapped recently, indicating someone tall passed through while mounted. Scraps of rope caught on thorns, the fibers still fresh, suggesting captives had been tied together and marched south. And there, pressed into soft earth near a burned cabin, a boot print that matched Jordan's distinctive gait. Elias had watched the man walk enough times to recognize the slight favor Jordan gave his right foot, a remnant of an old injury. The trail led south toward the borderlands. Elias followed it carefully, reading the landscape like text. The convoy had moved quickly, but not carefully, leaving signs everywhere for someone who knew how to look. They weren't expecting pursuit. They believed the valley's destruction had broken any resistance. They were wrong. Afternoon heat pressed down as Elias crossed into rougher country. The trail wound through rocky hills and sparse vegetation. He moved steadily, conserving energy, pausing occasionally to verify direction. Near a dried creek bed, he spotted movement. Elias dismounted, tying his horse to a stunted mesquite tree. He approached on foot, quiet and low. 3 people huddled beneath an overhang, 2 women and a young man, all from the valley. They startled when Elias appeared, fear flashing across their faces before recognition settled in. "It's just me," Elias said quietly, raising his hands to show he meant no threat. The older woman, Anna, who had helped tend gardens in the valley, spoke first. "We thought you'd left. Thought you abandoned us after yesterday. I'm tracking Jordan." The young man, Daniel, nodded grimly. "We saw him. Last night, when the marshals were dividing captives, Jordan took 6 people, Rachel, Moses, Sarah, and 3 others, and headed south with 2 bounty hunters. They're taking them to the borderlands to sell." "Did you hear where exactly?" "There's a trading post near the Sabine River," Anna said. "Place called Crowley's Station. Lawless territory, where slavers operate openly. We heard one of the bounty hunters mention it while they were loading wagons." Elias absorbed this information, his mind already working through routes and timing. How long ago did they leave? Maybe 6 hours. They had wagons, though, so they'll move slower than a single rider. "Listen carefully," Elias said, crouching to their level. "There's a farmstead about 10 miles northwest of here. Thatcher Farm. Ask for Aurelia Carter. Tell her Elias sent you and that you need shelter until it's safe to move again. She'll help you." "What about you?" Daniel asked. "I'm finishing what I started." Anna reached out, gripping his arm. "Don't lose yourself to vengeance, Elias. Don't become what they made you." "I'm not seeking vengeance. I'm seeking justice." He stood, preparing to leave. "Get to Thatcher Farm before dark. Stay off main roads." He left them there, returning to his horse and continuing south. Early evening brought a shift in Elias's thinking. He had been operating as the Black Panther, the mythic figure who struck from shadows, who inspired hope and fear in equal measure. But that identity had relied on Isaiah's vision, on the belief that liberation could transform systems and save souls. The valley's destruction proved otherwise. Systems didn't transform through hope alone. Sometimes they required dismantling completely, piece by piece, no matter how dark the work became. Elias stopped near a cluster of rocks as the sun touched the horizon. He dismounted and removed the black oilskin duster, folding it carefully and placing it in his saddlebag. The duster represented Isaiah's dream, but Elias needed something colder now, something more calculated and precise. He checked his weapons, a rifle, a revolver, a knife. He inventoried his supplies, ensuring everything was ready for what came next. This wasn't about inspiring legends anymore. This was about ending a betrayal definitively, permanently. He would retrieve those 6 captives. He would stop Jordan from profiting off more suffering, and he would ensure Jordan never betrayed anyone again. Night fell as Elias found an abandoned trapper's hut, partially collapsed, but offering enough shelter for a few hours' rest. He built no fire, eating dried meat and hardtack in darkness. He spent time maintaining his equipment with methodical care, sharpening his knife until the blade gleamed, cleaning his revolver, checking each chamber, repairing loose stitching on his saddle with practiced hands. From his saddlebag, he retrieved Isaiah's remaining notes, the pages that hadn't burned. He read through them slowly, seeing his brother's handwriting, remembering conversations they'd shared about freedom and justice, and whether violence could ever be righteous. Isaiah had believed in collective liberation, in building networks where everyone rose together. Elias whispered into the darkness, "I'm sorry, brother. Sorry I let Jordan destroy what you built. Sorry I didn't see the betrayal coming. But I promise you this. He won't profit from what he's done. He won't get away with destroying your dream." The words felt both like apology and vow, acknowledgement and determination. Elias lay down on the hut's dirt floor, forcing himself to rest despite the restlessness burning through his muscles. Sleep came eventually, shallow and troubled. Just after midnight, Elias jerked awake from a nightmare. Isaiah's face, the rope, the moment everything changed. He sat up, breathing hard, orienting himself in the darkness. Then he saw it through the hut's broken wall. Lantern light on a far ridge, perhaps 2 miles distant. A small convoy moving slowly through the night. Jordan's convoy. Elias stood immediately, gathering his gear with quiet efficiency. He saddled his horse in darkness, checking straps by feel. The lantern light moved steadily southwest, following what looked like an old trader's path toward the borderlands. Elias mounted up and followed, silent as a shadow, cold as winter stone. The hunt had begun. The moon hung thin and pale above the borderlands as Elias followed the lantern light through increasingly treacherous terrain. Rocky outcroppings jutted from the earth like broken teeth, and the trail narrowed into passages barely wide enough for a single wagon. His horse picked its way carefully through loose stone, hooves finding purchase where there seemed to be none. Elias stayed far enough back to avoid detection, but close enough to maintain visual contact. The convoy moved slowly, hampered by the wagons and the rough ground. He counted 3 riders, 2 wagons, and what looked like 6 figures huddled in the rear wagon bed, the captives. The night stretched on with agonizing slowness. Elias's body ached from the valley assault, from days of constant movement, from the weight of everything that had collapsed around him. But he pushed the pain aside, focusing entirely on the convoy ahead. Just before dawn, the lanterns stopped moving. Elias dismounted, tying his horse to a scrub oak well off the trail. He approached on foot, using the pre-dawn shadows and his knowledge of silent movement to get closer. The terrain favored stealth. Plenty of rocks for cover, scattered vegetation to break his silhouette. As the sky began to lighten, Elias found a position on a ridge overlooking a narrow ravine. Below, Jordan's camp took shape in the growing light. 2 wagons sat near the center of the ravine. The captives, all 6 of them, sat bound together near the larger wagon, their backs against the wooden wheel. 3 men tended a small fire, brewing coffee and eating hardtack. Jordan stood apart from the others, studying a map spread across the wagon's tailgate. Elias recognized the 2 bounty hunters, rough men he'd seen operating around Plantations before. They carried themselves with the casual violence of people who'd made careers from other people's suffering. The ravine's geography was significant. Steep walls on 3 sides, only one main exit to the south. Jordan had chosen a defensive position, probably expecting trouble from competing slavers rather than rescue attempts. But the narrow space also created opportunities for someone who understood terrain. Elias spent the next hour watching, learning their patterns. One bounty hunter stayed near the captives constantly. The other moved between the fire and the wagon. Jordan paced, checking his pocket watch repeatedly, clearly anxious about his buyer's arrival. As morning light strengthened, Elias began planning his approach with cold precision. Near mid-morning, the guard near the captives walked away to relieve himself behind a rock outcropping. Jordan and the other bounty hunter were focused on repairing a broken wagon axle. Elias moved. He descended the ravine wall using handholds and ledges, his cowboy boots finding purchase on weathered stone. He reached the ravine floor without sound, immediately dropping into shadows behind a large boulder. The captives sat 15 yards away. Elias could see their faces now: exhaustion, fear, resignation. He recognized Rachel and Moses from the valley, along with 4 others he'd helped liberate weeks ago. He waited until the guard's footsteps faded further away, then darted across open ground to the wagon. Rachel's eyes widened when she saw him, but he pressed a finger to his lips. She nodded, understanding immediately. Elias cut the ropes binding her and Moses with quick strokes of his knife. He leaned close, whispering instructions. Follow the ravine east to where it narrows. Climb out there. There are handholds. My horse is tied a quarter-mile north under an oak. Take her and ride to Thatcher Farm. Tell Aurelia what happened. What about the others? Moses whispered. I'll get them out, but I need you two to go now while the guard is away. Rachel gripped his hand briefly. Thank you. They slipped away, moving low and fast toward the ravine's eastern section. Elias watched them disappear around a bend just as the guard returned. The man noticed nothing amiss. The remaining 4 captives had shifted positions to hide the missing 2, their bodies blocking the cut ropes from easy view. Elias retreated to his boulder, then began climbing back up the ravine wall. He had intelligence now. He had reduced the captives needing immediate rescue, and he knew Jordan expected buyers by evening. Time to set traps. Through late morning and into early afternoon, Elias worked with methodical patience. He rigged ropes across the ravine's southern exit, the only viable path for wagons, positioning them at ankle height for horses. The ropes were nearly invisible against the rocky ground, anchored to boulders on either side. He identified loose rock shelves on the ravine's western wall. Using his knife and collected stones, he carefully destabilized them, creating controlled collapse points that could be triggered with thrown rocks. He gathered handfuls of burrs and thorns, placing them strategically along the path where horses would naturally step when entering the ravine. Every trap utilized skills learned through years of ranch work, understanding how horses moved, how terrain could be weaponized, how small preparations created large disruptions. By mid-afternoon, the ravine had become a calculated snare. Elias positioned himself on the eastern ridge with clear sight lines to the entire camp. He checked his rifle, ensuring it was loaded and ready. His revolver sat loose in its holster. His knife rested within easy reach. Then he waited. The sun crawled across the sky. Jordan paced constantly now, his anxiety visible even from a distance. The bounty hunters grew irritable with the heat and waiting. The 4 remaining captives sat in silence, occasionally glancing toward where Rachel and Moses had disappeared. As the sun touched the western horizon, riders appeared at the ravine's southern entrance. 4 men on horseback, dressed in the formal roughness of professional slave traders. They rode expensive horses and carried themselves with the confidence of people operating in lawless territory, where money bought protection. Jordan stepped forward to meet them, his posture shifting into something obsequious and eager. Elias watched as they dismounted, as greetings were exchanged, as Jordan gestured toward the captives like a merchant displaying goods. One of the buyers walked closer to inspect the captives. He grabbed a woman's face roughly, examining her teeth. The casual dehumanization of the gesture made Elias's jaw tighten. The buyer turned back toward Jordan. 4 captives? Your message said 6. 2 escaped this morning, Jordan said quickly. But these 4 are worth good money. Strong workers, all of them. We'll give you half what we discussed. That's not fair. Take it, or we leave. Jordan's face twisted with frustration, but he nodded. The buyers began counting out coins. Elias stood, raised his rifle, and fired. The shot struck the ground inches from the lead buyer's feet. The horses spooked immediately, rearing and bolting. Elias fired again, this time hitting the shoulder of one of the bounty hunters. Chaos erupted instantly. The buyer's horses trampled through the burr-covered ground, causing more panic. 2 horses hit the trip ropes and went down hard, throwing their riders. Elias threw rocks at the destabilized shelf on the western wall, triggering a collapse that blocked the southern exit with fallen stone. He descended the ravine wall rapidly, rifle slung across his back, revolver now in hand. One buyer tried to draw his weapon. Elias shot him in the leg. Another attempted to reach the captives. Elias put a bullet in the ground at his feet, forcing him back. The remaining bounty hunter fled on foot. Within moments, the buyers were either injured, pinned by fallen horses, or running. Jordan stood frozen near the wagon, his face pale with shock and recognition. Elias walked toward him slowly, deliberately, his revolver raised. "Elias," Jordan said, his voice cracking, "listen. I'm done listening. You don't understand what Isaiah did to me." Elias stopped 10 feet away. "Tell me. Make me understand how betraying hundreds of people brings justice." Jordan's face contorted with years of compressed rage. 5 years ago, Isaiah exposed my relationship with a white woman on the plantation. He told the overseer because he thought it was dangerous. That woman's husband killed her. Her family blamed me. I was whipped until I couldn't stand. My own family disowned me for bringing shame. "So you became a traitor?" "Isaiah ruined my life," Jordan shouted. "He took everything from me in the name of righteousness. When I heard about his liberation plan, I saw my chance. I could finally have power. Finally make them all pay. Millions of people suffer injustice without becoming what you became," Elias said, his voice hard and cold, "without selling their own people for coin. Easy for you to say. You were Isaiah's perfect brother. You got his respect, his trust, his legacy. I got nothing but scorn. You got a chance at freedom. You got rescued from Red Harvest Plantation. You could have helped build something better. I don't want better. I want revenge." Elias raised the revolver, aiming directly at Jordan's chest. His finger tightened on the trigger. Every muscle in his body screamed for this moment of finality, for the satisfaction of ending the man who destroyed Isaiah's dream. Jordan closed his eyes, waiting for death. But Elias saw Isaiah's face in his mind, heard his brother's voice talking about justice versus vengeance, about building rather than destroying, about choosing humanity even when the world demanded brutality. Slowly, Elias lowered the gun. "No," he said quietly. "Isaiah wouldn't want me to become a killer. Not like this." He walked to Jordan and struck him hard across the temple with the revolver's grip. Jordan crumpled to the ground, unconscious. Elias bound Jordan's hands and feet with rope, then dragged him toward where the 4 remaining captives sat. He cut their bonds quickly. "You're free. Take the wagon and head north to Thatcher Farm. Aurelia Carter will help you." "What about him?" Moses's cousin Sarah asked, pointing at Jordan's prone form. "That's up to all of you to decide." Night had fallen completely by the time Jordan regained consciousness. He woke to find himself sitting bound in the center of the ravine, surrounded by the 4 people he'd planned to sell. Elias stood apart, watching silently. Sarah spoke first. "We could kill you. You deserve death for what you've done." Jordan said nothing, his eyes wide with fear. "But we're not going to," she continued, "because we're not like you. We don't trade lives for revenge. They untied him slowly. One of the men handed Jordan a single canteen of water. Walk west into the desert, Sarah said. If we ever see you again, the mercy ends. Jordan stared at them, stunned. You're exiling me? We're giving you life. What you do with it is between you and whatever God you believe in. Jordan stood shakily. He looked at Elias, searching for something, understanding, perhaps, or forgiveness. Elias offered neither. He simply watched as Jordan turned and began walking west into the darkness, carrying only the canteen. The night swallowed him completely within minutes. Sarah walked over to Elias. Was that justice? I think so, Elias said quietly. Isaiah would have called it mercy. And what do you call it? The end of something. Maybe the beginning of something else. Dawn broke cold and clear over the ravine. Elias stood watching the eastern sky lighten, his body heavy with exhaustion, but his mind sharp with purpose. Behind him, the 4 rescued captives gathered near the abandoned wagon, preparing for the journey ahead. Sarah approached him quietly. How far to safety? 2 days, if we move carefully, Elias said. We'll follow creek beds where the terrain hides our tracks. No main roads. They departed as the sun climbed higher, leaving the ravine and its scattered evidence of confrontation behind. Elias led them northwest through scrub brush and rocky passages, choosing paths that offered cover. The captives walked with the careful determination of people who understood freedom required constant vigilance. By mid-morning, they stopped at a spring to rest and refill canteens. Moses' cousin Sarah sat beside Elias, while the others drank. What you did last night, she said carefully. Letting Jordan live. That took more strength than killing him would have. I don't know if it was strength or just exhaustion, Elias admitted. But I know Isaiah would have done the same thing. Your brother sounds like he was a good man. He was better than me. I doubt that, Sarah said gently. You saved us. You're still saving us. They continued traveling through the afternoon heat, maintaining steady progress. Elias scouted ahead frequently, checking for signs of pursuit. The land remained empty and quiet. By late afternoon, they descended into a dense forest clearing where smoke from carefully concealed fires rose in thin wisps. Survivors from the valley had gathered here. Families who escaped through Samuel Drayton's emergency tunnels, individuals who fled during the chaos, children who'd been hidden in root cellars. Nearly 70 people occupied the clearing, constructing temporary shelters from branches and salvaged canvas. As Elias entered the clearing, a young boy spotted him and called out. Others turned, faces registering relief and recognition. Samuel Drayton emerged from a partially built shelter, his weathered face breaking into a weary smile. Elias, Samuel said, gripping his shoulder firmly. We hoped you'd survived. Barely, Elias said. I brought 4 more who need help. We'll make room. Samuel gestured toward the clearing's organized chaos. We're building something temporary here until we can find more permanent sanctuary. Movement near one of the fires caught Elias's attention. Aurelia stood there, her dress stained with travel dust, her expression uncertain as she watched him approach. He walked over slowly. They stood in silence for a long moment. I'm sorry, Aurelia said finally, her voice thick with emotion. I shouldn't have left you in the valley. I was afraid and angry, and I blamed you for something that wasn't your fault. You had every right to be afraid, Elias said quietly. I brought Jordan into our circle. I trusted him. The destruction came because I didn't see the betrayal sooner. No, Aurelia shook her head firmly. Jordan made his choices. You tried to honor your brother's dream. Those are different things. The valley still burned. And we're still here, Aurelia said, gesturing toward the bustling clearing. 70 people survived because of the tunnels you convinced Samuel to build. Children are alive because you taught people to fight smart instead of reckless. That matters, Elias. He looked at her, really looked, and saw the exhaustion in her features. the grief in her eyes, but also something harder to define. Hope, perhaps, or determination. "I can't undo what happened," Elias said, "but I can help build something stronger, something that doesn't depend on one person's vigilance or one hidden valley." "Then let's build it together," Aurelia said. They spent the remainder of the afternoon working alongside others. Elias helped construct shelters using techniques learned from years of ranch work. Sturdy frames, weatherproof layering, efficient use of limited materials. He assigned defensive positions around the clearing's perimeter and taught several men how to create early warning systems using tied bells and tripwires. Aurelia organized the children into learning groups, establishing routines and educational structure even in temporary circumstances. She consulted with elders about resource management and supply routes to safe houses still operating in the region. By sunset, the clearing had transformed from chaotic refuge into organized settlement. Fires burned in controlled pits. Shelters stood in logical arrangements. Families settled into assigned spaces with clear roles and responsibilities. Samuel found Elias near the clearing's edge, watching the sunset paint the forest canopy in amber and gold. "You're different than when I first met you," Samuel said thoughtfully. "Less like a shadow, more like a man." "I'm tired of being a shadow," Elias admitted. "Good, because these people don't need the Panther anymore. They need someone who can teach them to protect themselves, to build communities that survive beyond one generation's struggle. I'm not sure I know how to be that person." "You're already doing it," Samuel said, gesturing toward the clearing. "You're here. You're helping. You're not running or hiding behind a myth. That's leadership, Elias, the kind Isaiah would recognize." As evening deepened, the community gathered for a simple meal of cornmeal and wild greens. Children sat in clusters near the central fire, their earlier fear replaced by cautious curiosity. Several approached Elias as he ate, their eyes wide with questions. "Is it true you can ride faster than bounty hunters?" a young girl asked. "Is it true you freed 7 whole plantations by yourself?" a boy added. Elias smiled, setting down his tin plate. The Panther was just a story people needed during dark times, a name to give them hope when hope felt impossible. "But you did free people," the girl insisted. "I helped," Elias said carefully. "But freedom isn't something one person gives to another. It's something we build together, protect together, and teach the next generation to maintain." The children listened with solemn attention, absorbing his words like lessons they would carry forward. After the meal concluded, Elias walked to the clearing's northern edge, where a tall wooden post had been erected as a future marker for the settlement's boundary. He carried the black oilskin duster that had defined so much of the past months. Aurelia followed quietly, standing beside him as he draped the duster over the post. In the starlight, the fabric looked less ominous and more worn, just a practical coat that had seen hard travel and harder choices. "Are you done with it?" Aurelia asked softly. "I think so," Elias said. "It served its purpose, but we're building something different now, something that doesn't need shadows and myths." "What does it need?" "Teachers, builders, people willing to stay and do the slow work of creating safety that lasts beyond one generation's fight." Aurelia reached out and squeezed his hand briefly. "Then that's what we'll be." They stood together under the vast canopy of stars, watching the settlement below where families moved between fires, where children laughed quietly, where elders shared stories that would become the foundation of collective memory. Elias whispered into the night air, speaking to his brother's spirit, or perhaps just to himself. Let the next generation write their own stories. Behind them, the clearing glowed with warm firelight. Families settled into makeshift homes with the careful optimism of people who understood safety was fragile but possible. Children prepared for sleep under watchful protection. Elders planned for tomorrow's work. Elias turned away from the post and walked back toward the settlement. not as a shadowy figure moving through darkness, but as a man entering a circle of light, ready to teach, to build, to become part of something larger than vengeance or myth. The fires burned steadily through the night, marking the beginning of what they would build together. I hope you found that story powerful. Leave a like on the video and subscribe so that you do not miss out on the next one. I have handpicked 2 stories for you that are even more powerful. Have a great day.